Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Skills and Abilities. Today we're going to be looking at the Paladin aura known as Meditation, which is a really popular one within the community. Now, meditation is often misunderstood, and a lot of people don't really quite understand how mana regeneration works. So the focus of our video today is actually going to be on talking about how mana regeneration actually works. And you might be asking me, well, what does that have to do with anything? How does that mean? You just put the aura on, and that's all you got to do, right? You just put the aura on, and it works, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. Right. That's how it works. No, that's actually not how it works. So meditation has a pretty hefty percentage increase. As you can see, even at level 4, it's 375% mana recovery rate, which you would think is a pretty massive amount, but it's actually not much at all. And the way that mana regeneration works is that mana regeneration is highly dependent on the amount of mana you actually have in your mana pool, not the mana recovery rate. You can have almost 2,000% mana recovery rate, and it will do next to nothing if you don't actually have a good mana pool to begin with. And for this reason, I'm going to bring up a chart. That's right, I have charts. So this is the mana regeneration chart here. And as you can see here, we have a maximum mana column, which shows the maximum mana that your character currently has. And then on this side is the regeneration column. So this is the regeneration bonus. And you'll notice that with 350% regeneration, which is actually pretty close to what meditation is currently offering, but with only 35 mana, we are looking at a mana recovery rate of 1.3 per second, which isn't really a lot. It's actually very slow. However, with a larger mana pool and 0% mana regeneration per second, let's say we were sitting at 1,000 mana, we would have 8.3 mana per second, which is a hell of a lot better than 1.3 mana per second with 350% mana regeneration. And what does this mean? Well, mana regeneration doesn't really work very well by itself. It requires that you have some mana to actually take advantage of. In my particular case, I'm currently sitting at 225 mana, which means that I'm about here on the chart, and I currently have meditation, which is at 375%, so I would be looking at 7.4 mana per second, which is a decent little amount, but not really the most amazing. To get the highest benefit out of regeneration, you need a larger mana pool. The larger your mana pool, the more the regeneration you will get. Notice, for instance, even down here at 1,600 mana, we are still only getting 13.3 mana regeneration per second. But if we combine together 1,600 mana pool with 350% regeneration, we're now sitting at nearly 60 mana per second, which is pretty massive. And the regeneration effects that you get from meditation increase exponentially with each point of mana that you increase your mana pool by. This means that having meditation by itself is kind of useless if you don't actually have a high mana pool. The smaller your mana pool, the less effect you're going to get from meditation, to the point of silliness where it's really not going to do much of anything at all. I often hear like Amazons and things like that tell me this. They're like, well, I have a meditation polearm and everything, and I'm just not getting enough mana to be able to maintain my mana pool. And I'm like, well, how much mana do you have? And they're like, I got like 80. And I'm like, yeah, it's meditation polearm's not going to do anything for you with 80 mana. You're going to have to bump up those numbers. Those are rookie numbers. Get them up a little bit. Now, the cool thing about meditation is that it can be utilized by more than just the Paladin. There are some very key items within the game which have allowed many players to benefit from the meditation aura, basically no matter what character you're on, and that is the Insight rune word. It's a relatively cheap rune word. It's only Ral Tier Tal Soul, and it does offer a meditation aura of a varying level. I think it's between like 14 to 17 or something like that, which really doesn't matter all that much. A lot of people hyper-focus on the level of meditation, but the difference between level like 14 and level 17 isn't really that big of a difference. We're talking about 625% versus 700%. That small amount of increase in regen doesn't really do anything. And I hate to tell you guys this, but if you're focusing on that level 17 meditation on the Insight Polearm, you're silly. The thing that you should be focusing on with the Insight Polearm instead of the level of the meditation is actually the critical strike, which is the most important thing for the Insight Polearm. The Insight Polearm has between 1 and 6 crit strike bonus, which goes to your mercenary, and that 6 on the crit strike bonus is the most important thing, because it gives your mercenary the ability to have double damage, basically for free, which causes him to hit a hell of a lot harder and usually survive a lot better with a little bit of life leech. And if your mercenary is dead, well, your meditation isn't going to do jack diddly because he's dead, and he's not going to provide you with meditation while he's dead. So prioritize your mercenary actually staying alive so that the meditation aura can actually affect you on a regular basis. And also know that the meditation aura isn't going to do anything for you if your mana pool sucks. So bump up those rookie numbers so you actually have some mana to regenerate. Now, another interesting side effect of the Insight Polearm as well as the meditation aura is that it synergizes with prayer. It adds on the regeneration effect from prayer to the meditation aura. So if you put the Insight Polearm onto a mercenary that is utilizing prayer, it will double the prayer effect by adding the 21 heal to the Insight Polearm, which is very nice. Now, the healing effect from prayer, the healing effect from meditation, and the healing effect from cleansing can actually all stack, but they require the same level aura. So this is very important. Say, for instance, you had 8 players in the game, and all 8 players were utilizing the Insight Polearm on their mercenaries. And they were all utilizing prayer mercs, right? Well, Insight and basically all auras tend to fight with each other. The highest level takes precedent over the lower level, and the lower levels don't work anymore. But if they are all the same level, they can actually stack the regeneration. Not the mana regeneration, mind you, but just the healing from the prayer aura, which means that you can potentially have up to 8 players in a game with 8 mercenaries utilizing all Insight Polearms, and if they are all the same level aura, they will all have the regeneration from the prayer aura spread to the entire group, multiplied by 8 players, which is really interesting. This means that you'll get freaking Wolverine levels of regeneration. Health regeneration, mind you. Now, the mana regeneration is going to vary, as we talked about, between all players. So 700% mana recovery rate is not the same for everyone. For instance, if I took this polearm outside right now and I tried to spam, say, let's spam Holy Shield, which is an easy one. I would probably not be able to maintain my mana pool even with meditation. And this is because my mana pool is really small. And the smaller your mana pool is, the less meditation actually works for you. And as an example of what I mean by this, let me go to one of my online characters. I believe she's still online. I'm going to have to reboot the game real quick. But I have a character online who does not use meditation. And she is capable of completely regenerating her mana without needing a meditation polearm. And it's because she has a massively huge mana pool. The larger the mana pool is, the faster the regeneration is anyway. And sorceresses in particular tend to have a ridiculous amount of regeneration just natively and don't really necessarily need meditation polearms. In fact, more often than not, you will find that sorceresses are just poorly built, and people aren't paying attention properly to how the character works. In this particular case, I have a character who is utilizing Energy Shield. She only has 882 mana, because I believe she is currently missing some of her equipment. Let me throw some of this in here. And why does she have a Suicide Branch? That's the wrong item entirely. I was stolen all her equipment. Anyway, it'll still work. So if we take this character outside right now and we utilize a high mana cost skill, let's see what I got here that's high mana cost. I believe enchant. I don't have a point in enchant. Let's just use teleport, shall we? as you can see, even with spamming teleport, and not even having my proper equipment, by the way, because I stole some of her equipment, it is very difficult for me to run out of mana on this particular character. And if I stop for even a fraction of a second, you'll notice that her mana goes up extremely fast. And this is because she already has a really high amount of regeneration in the form of warmth. And she has a very large mana pool. 882 is particularly large. It's not like the biggest that you can possibly get. That's what she said. But it's definitely on the higher end of things. And the more mana you have with regeneration, the better it works, to the point where literally you can just spam abilities like teleport without ever having to worry about running out. If I was using my correct equipment, which would be like a spirit sword or something with better plus to skills, I probably wouldn't run out of mana at all. And in fact, at a certain point, you can actually get your regeneration so ridiculously high, even without something like the meditation polearm, that you don't need to ever worry about mana ever again. Because building your mana regeneration is really just about having a mana pool big enough that the mana regeneration that you do have can function properly. Now, it's not always possible to build a really large mana pool on all characters, but it's definitely possible not to have a crappy mana pool. So let me put it that way. It's easier to not have garbage mana than it is to have godlike mana. So when you're building a character, it doesn't hurt to pick up a couple items that will increase your mana pool, or just in general make things a little bit easier on you. If you take a look at things like rings or amulets, helmets, like all sorts of various things, you can find rings that have like plus 80 mana on them, amulets that have like plus 80 mana, things like frostburns that gives you a huge bonus to your maximum mana. And all of this comes into play when you're talking about your regeneration. And even if you're using Meditation Polearm. If you are using Meditation Polearm, to get the best effect out of it, you want to increase your mana pool to a larger amount so that the regeneration is actually working properly. As you can see by the chart that we were going over earlier, the regeneration is terrible by itself. But in combination with a large mana pool, even with just about 400 mana, which is a pretty decent amount, that same 350% mana regeneration is 14 times more effective than it was with the 35 mana pool. So just bringing your mana up to around 400 with a Meditation Polearm multiplies the effectiveness of the Meditation Polearm by 14 times its rated value. And it gets even better than that. So the higher your mana goes, the better the Meditation Polearm works, the better the meditation skill works. And this means that you can have ridiculous amounts of mana regeneration, ridiculous amounts of life regeneration, and basically for everybody nearby, because the radius on level 17 meditation is 30 freaking 2 yards, which means it hits the entire screen and then some. Now, granted, most paladins won't run this. There are too many better auras in the tree that paladins want to run. They want to run conviction. They want to run fanaticism. They want to run concentration. Occasionally they'll run holy shock, holy freeze, and holy fire. But you very rarely will ever see a paladin mainline run meditation, and it's just because, well, there's no reason to. Paladins don't really have that insane mana consumption issues. The only one that's even close is the Hammerdin. And usually the Hammerdin could use like a Meditation Polearm mercenary or something to that effect. But for the most part, the Paladin just doesn't really have those mana regeneration problems. So when you see a Paladin using Meditation Aura, they're usually doing it for you, not for them. Early levels, it's also important to talk about early levels with meditation. So early levels meditation doesn't work very well at all. So as you level up your character will get mana per point, per level, basically. So every single character is different. All the classes have a different mana per level. But as you level up, your base mana increases. At really early levels, your mana pool is, well, pathetic. Level, what is this? I think it's level 18. when you get this ability. So at level, no, it's not level 18, it's the 24 ability. So at level 24, when you get this ability, you really don't have a very large mana pool. Most people don't, unless they spend some points into energy or actually have some items that are giving them a large amount of energy or mana. And this means that meditation tends to be rather ineffective at low levels. Because nobody really has a good mana pool to actually take advantage of the regeneration that meditation is offering. With the exception of maybe like an energy shield sorceress that might be dumping all her points into energy. Most characters still have a relatively low mana pool. One thing you can do early on to take advantage of this, though, is putting things like sapphires in items, finding any piece of equipment that has bonus mana on it, frost burns, of course, which are relatively low level, any item that is going to increase your mana, like Soges, Silk Weaves, Wizard Spike, Spirit Sword, Spirit Shield, all of which have bonuses to mana to them. And the more bonus to mana you can get, the better effective meditation will be. So as you level up, you're going to be looking for those items to increase that pool to actually make sure that meditation is actually doing what it's supposed to. There's really not a lot more to go over with meditation. It is a very wonderful ability, which can help out a lot of people. But it's also, in my opinion, a crutch for a lot of characters because they don't want to build their character correctly. Because usually, especially with the sorceress and even the druid with the solar creeper and several other characters, if you build the characters correctly, they usually don't have mana issues. And you can use something else instead, like an infinity for conviction, or a thresher for decrepify, or any other number of things like a plague sword for cleansing, which could be way better for survivability, especially if you're an energy shield sorceress, by the way. Because just in general, if you can get away from using the Insight Polearm, you probably should, because there's a lot better items that you could potentially be using on your mercenary instead. A lot more utilitarian things. Infinity is the one that stands out the most, though, because if you can't arrest your mana concerns, if you can't fix your mana problems, how are you going to be able to utilize something like Infinity? Because you can't even survive without the Insight Polearm. You literally, your mana hits 0 in like 5 seconds, and you don't understand why. And putting in Infinity on your mercenary would completely kill your mana to the point of absurdity. So if you can figure out how to fix your character so that you don't need Insight, so that you don't need the meditation, you actually are usually better off because you can utilize better items on those characters. Anyway, I think that's pretty much everything when it comes to meditation. And as always, I do appreciate you guys watching my videos. And keep watching.